They told the Alpha she was a witch. They told him she had stolen the heirs to the pack to use their blood for a ritual. Dominic Cole, the most feared Alpha in Montana, didn't come to negotiate. He came to execute. He brought his enforcers to tear the cabin apart and leave no survivors. But when he kicked down that door, ready to paint the walls red, he saw the one thing that could bring a monster to his knees. His missing pups weren't in a cage. They were asleep on her chest. And when Dominic stepped forward, his own children growled at him to protect her. This is the story of how a kill order turned into a coronation. November 14th, 2025. Whitefish, Montana. The Wipers on the 2018 Subaru Outback were fighting a losing battle against the sleet. Tessa Hart gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned the color of bone. She wasn't supposed to be out here. She was a pediatric nurse from Seattle, taking a 3-week sabbatical to clear her head after losing a patient, not an explorer of the treacherous backroads of the Bitterroot National Forest. But the Airbnb listing had promised seclusion and serenity, and right now, Tessa had too much seclusion and zero serenity. "Come on, old girl," Tessa whispered to the dashboard, her breath fogging in the freezing cabin air. "Just 2 more miles." She saw it in the periphery of her headlights first, a heap of dark fur on the side of the road, half buried in a snowdrift. Most people would have kept driving. In this part of Montana, stopping for roadkill was a good way to get hit by a logging truck or attacked by a scavenger. But Tessa was a nurse. The instinct to heal overrode the instinct to survive. She slammed the brakes. The car skidded, fishtailing dangerously before coming to a halt on the gravel shoulder. Tessa grabbed her flashlight and the heavy wool blanket from the back seat. She stepped out into the biting wind. It was -10 degrees easily. "Hello?" she called out, feeling foolish. She approached the drift. It wasn't a deer. It was 2 dogs. Massive, dark grey puppies huddled together, shivering so violently it shook the snow off their fur. They looked like husky mixes, but their paws were enormous, the size of saucers. They were barely conscious. "Oh, you poor babies," Tessa gasped, dropping to her knees in the slush. One of them, the slightly larger one with a patch of white on his ear, whined. It was a sound of pure misery. Tessa didn't think. She acted. She wrapped the wool blanket around them, struggling to lift them. They were dense, heavier than any dog she'd ever lifted, pure muscle and bone density. "I've got you," she grunted, heaving them into the heated back seat of her car. "I'm not leaving you here to freeze." She drove the remaining mile to the cabin, a rugged A-frame structure surrounded by towering pines. Inside, she cranked the wood stove until the iron clicked and popped. She made a nest of quilts on the rug in front of the fire. She checked their vitals. Their heart rates were slow, dangerous hypothermia setting in. She grabbed some leftover roast beef from her cooler, warmed it in the microwave, and hand-fed them. They ate voraciously, snapping at her fingers but never biting down. "You're safe now," she soothed, stroking their thick, coarse fur. "I'm Tessa. Who owns you two?" There were no collars. No chips she could feel. By 2 a.m. the storm outside had turned into a blizzard. The wind howled like a banshee, shaking the window panes. Tessa was exhausted. She lay down on the rug next to them, intending to just close her eyes for a moment. The larger pup crawled over. He didn't bite. He didn't run. He laid his heavy head directly over her heart. The smaller one curled into the crook of her neck. They were incredibly warm, radiating a heat that felt unnatural, like lying next to a furnace. Surrounded by their heat, Tessa fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. She didn't hear the tires crunching on the gravel outside. She didn't hear the 40 men surrounding the cabin. She didn't hear the safety catches clicking off on 40 semi-automatic rifles. November 15th, 2025, 3:15 a.m. Dominic Cole stood in the center of the gravel driveway, the snow melting the instant it touched the shoulders of his leather jacket. He was 6'4", of lethal intent. His eyes, usually a calm hazel, were currently bleeding into a glowing amber, the sign of a wolf on the edge of a shift. "Status," Dominic growled. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated in the chests of the men around him. Liam, his beta and best friend since childhood, stepped forward. Liam was holding a thermal imaging tablet. 2 heat signatures inside, small. 1 large. "It matches the intel, Dom. The witch has them." "Is she armed?" "Unknown. But if she took Leo and Mia from the nursery inside the compound, she's not human. She bypassed wards that have stood for a century." Dominic's jaw tightened. Leo and Mia were his life. Since his mate died in childbirth 3 years ago, those twins were the only thing tethering his wolf to his humanity. When he had found their beds empty 4 hours ago, his roar had shattered windows in the pack house. The scent trail had led them here, to this rental cabin, to the scent of a stranger. "We don't take chances," Dominic said, his voice devoid of mercy. "If she is a witch, she can use their blood to curse the whole pack. We go in hard, no hesitation." "And the pups?" Liam asked quietly. "I get the pups," Dominic said, his canines lengthening. "You deal with the woman. Make it quick. Tear her throat out before she can speak a spell." The Obsidian Ridge pack moved like smoke, silent, deadly. Dominic approached the front door. He didn't bother with the handle. He channeled the strength of his alpha wolf into his right leg and kicked the solid oak door just below the lock. Crack! The wood splintered like balsa. The door flew inward, crashing against the wall with a deafening boom. Dominic surged into the room, claws extended, ready to eviscerate the threat. Liam and 3 enforcers flanked him, guns raised, wolves rising under their skin. "Where is she?" Dominic roared, the sound shaking the floorboards. Then everyone froze. The scene wasn't a ritual. There were no candles, no daggers, no chanting. There was just a fire dying in the hearth, casting a soft orange glow on a woman in flannel pajamas asleep on the rug, and lying on top of her, weighing her down into the carpet, were the heirs to the Obsidian Ridge pack. The noise of the door woke them instantly. Tessa shot up, screaming as the cold air rushed in, but she couldn't move because 70 pounds of wolf pup pinned her down. Dominic took a step forward, his amber eyes locking onto the woman. "Get away from them!" But then the impossible happened. Leo, the future alpha, stood up on Tessa's chest. He looked at his father, the terrifying alpha Dominic Cole, and he snarled. A deep, guttural warning. He bared his baby teeth, standing protectively over the terrified woman. Mia, the smaller twin, buried her face in Tessa's neck and whimpered, not in fear of Tessa, but in fear of the intruders. "Don't hurt them!" Tessa screamed, her arm instinctively wrapping around Mia to shield the pup. She looked up at Dominic, her blue eyes wide with terror but burning with defiance. "I don't have any money. Just don't hurt the dogs." Dominic stopped dead. The rage in his blood hit a wall of confusion. She wasn't casting a spell. She wasn't holding a knife. She was shielding his children from him. "Hold," Dominic commanded, raising a hand. The enforcers lowered their weapons, looking confused. "Dom," Liam whispered urgently. "The pups, they're guarding her. That's not possible. They don't bond with humans." Dominic stepped closer. The woman flinched, curling tighter around the pups. The scent hit him then. It wasn't the sulfur and sage smell of a witch. It was vanilla, antiseptic, and fear. Pure human fear. And beneath that, something else. Something that made his inner wolf stop pacing and sit down, ears perked. "Who are you?" Dominic asked, his voice rough but no longer shouting. "I'm Tessa," she stammered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I found them in the snow, on the highway. They were freezing. Please, I'm a nurse. I was just trying to warm them up." Dominic looked at Leo. His son stopped growling, but kept his stance firm on Tessa's stomach, watching his father with suspicion. "You found them?" Dominic asked slowly. "Route 93, Tessa said, tears spilling over. "Mile marker 14. They were buried in a drift." Dominic's blood ran cold. Mile marker 14 was 10 miles from the pack house. How did 3-year-old pups get 10 miles away in a blizzard without being seen? Someone hadn't kidnapped them. Someone had thrown them out like trash to die. And this human had saved them. "Liam," Dominic said, his tone changing from executioner to general. "Secure the perimeter. Get the car warm." "What are we doing with her?" Liam asked, eyeing Tessa. Dominic looked at Tessa, who was trembling, stroking Mia's fur to calm the pup down. "She touched them," Dominic said. "She knows they exist, and my children seem to have claimed her. She's coming with us." "Am I being arrested?" Tessa squeaked. Dominic leaned down, his face inches from hers. She could see the scars on his jaw, the terrifying intensity of his eyes. "No, Tessa," he said softly, "but you are coming home with me. Because if you stay here, the thing that threw my children into the snow will come back to finish the job, and I won't let anyone who saved my blood die tonight." November 15th, 2025, 5 a.m., the ride to the Blackwood estate, the headquarters of the Obsidian Ridge Pack, was silent and terrifying. Tessa sat in the back of a black SUV that cost more than her house. On either side of her sat the dogs, Leo and Mia. They refused to be separated from her. Every time Dominic, who was driving, looked in the rearview mirror, he saw Mia's head resting on Tessa's lap. They pulled up to a massive iron gate. It swung open, revealing a sprawling estate that looked half like a luxury ski resort, and half like a military fortress. "Get her inside," Dominic ordered as they parked. "Take her to the guest wing. Post guards." "I have a name," Tessa snapped. The shock was wearing off, replaced by the indignation of a woman who had been kidnapped by men in tactical gear. "And I have a job. I need to call my hospital." Dominic turned, looming over her. The snow crunched under his boots. "Oh, you have no job right now, Tessa. You are a loose end. Until I find out who took my children and dumped them to freeze, you are under my protection, whether you like it or not." "They're just dogs," Tessa yelled. "Why is this a military operation for 2 puppies?" Dominic looked at Liam. Liam sighed. "Show her," Dominic said. Liam hesitated. "Dom, the law. She's already involved. Show her." Liam stepped back. He closed his eyes. There was a sickening sound of cracking bone and tearing fabric. Tessa screamed and scrambled backward, hitting the side of the SUV. Where the man named Liam had stood, a massive russet-colored wolf now stood. It was huge, the size of a pony. It looked at her with intelligent human eyes. Tessa's world tilted. The vertigo was instantaneous. "I'm dreaming," she whispered. "I hit my head. Carbon monoxide poisoning from the wood stove." "Real," Dominic said, stepping into her space. He didn't shift, but he let his eyes bleed into that glowing amber again. "We are werewolves. Those puppies you saved are wolf shifters. They are my children. And you, Tessa, are the only human they have ever allowed to touch them." Tessa looked at Leo and Mia. They trotted up to her, nudging her hand with wet noses. They weren't dogs. They were people. Children. She fainted. When she woke up, she was in a bed that felt like a cloud. The room was opulent, mahogany furniture, a fireplace roaring with heat, and heavy velvet curtains. She sat up, gasping. "Easy," a voice said. Dominic was sitting in an armchair in the corner. He had showered and changed into a dark grey sweater and jeans, looking less like a warlord and more like a brooding billionaire. But the power radiating off him was palpable. "You fainted," he said. "Shock." "You turn into animals," Tessa said flatly. "Yes. And I'm a prisoner." "A guest," Dominic corrected. "A guest who cannot leave." "For how long?" "Until I find the traitor in my pack." Dominic stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the snowy grounds. The nursery was locked from the inside. The cameras were looped. Whoever took Leo and Mia had high-level clearance. They wanted my heirs dead. If you hadn't stopped... His voice cracked. Just a fracture, but Tessa heard it. She was a nurse. She knew what trauma sounded like. "They were freezing," Tessa said softly. "If I had been 10 minutes later." Dominic turned to her. The intensity in his gaze made her breath hitch. "You saved the future of this pack. I owe you a debt I cannot repay. But that creates a problem." "What problem?" "The pack law states that no human can know of our existence and live," Dominic said. Tessa's heart stopped. "You're going to kill me?" "No," Dominic said firmly. "But my council will want to. They are old-fashioned. They will see you as a security risk, especially since—" He trailed off. "Since what?" "Since my children seem to have imprinted on you." Dominic ran a hand through his dark hair. "Wolves don't bond with humans easily. For them to sleep on you, to growl at me, it suggests a connection that defies our biology. The council will think you used magic." "I'm just a nurse." "I know," Dominic said. He walked over to the bed. He was close enough that she could smell him. Rain, pine, and something spicy like clove. It was intoxicating. "I checked your background. Tessa Hart, 28, Seattle Grace Hospital, clean record, no occult connections." He leaned down, placing a hand on the bedpost. "I need you to trust me, Tessa. I am the Alpha. My word is law. But I have enemies inside these walls. I need you to play a role." "What role?" "The nanny," Dominic said. "You are a specialist I hired for the children. That is the cover story. You stay close to them, you keep them safe, and in return, I find the person who tried to kill them, and I make sure you get home with a bank account full enough to retire." Tessa looked at him. She should say no. She should demand a lawyer. But then the door creaked open. Leo and Mia trotted in. They had shifted back to their human forms, two beautiful dark-haired toddlers, about 3 years old, wearing oversized t-shirts. They looked at Tessa, their eyes wide and hopeful. "Tessa?" the boy Leo whispered. Tessa's heart melted. She looked back at Dominic. He looked desperate, a father terrified for his kids. "Okay," Tessa said. "I'll do it, but not for the money. For them." Dominic's eyes softened. For a second, the Alpha was gone, and just a man remained. "Thank you," he said. Suddenly the door burst open wide. A tall, striking woman with platinum blonde hair and eyes like ice stormed in. She wore a tight leather dress and radiated hostility. This was Serena, the pack's third in command, and the woman who had been trying to get into Dominic's bed since his wife died. "Is it true?" Serena demanded, her gaze raking over Tessa with disgust. "You brought a human stray into the inner sanctum. Dominic, the council is furious." Dominic's posture stiffened. The air in the room grew heavy. "She is not a stray, Serena," Dominic growled. "She is the new nanny." Serena laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "A human? Watching the heirs? She smells like fear and cheap soap. She'll be dead in a week." Serena stepped closer to the bed, leaning in to whisper to Tessa. "Leave while you can, human. Accidents happen in this house. Stairs are slippery. Wolves get hungry." Tessa felt a surge of anger. She sat up straighter. "I handle sick children and angry doctors for a living," Tessa said, surprised by her own boldness. "I think I can handle a glorified dog show." Dominic's lips twitched with a suppressed smile. Serena's eyes flashed red. She lunged. But before she could touch Tessa, a low, menacing growl filled the room. Not from Dominic. From Tessa's lap. Leo, in human form, was standing on the bed, his tiny teeth bared at Serena. "No!" the toddler screamed. "Mine!" Serena froze, shock plastered across her face. The pup defended her? Dominic stepped between them. "Get out, Serena, now!" Serena glared at Tessa, a promise of violence in her eyes, before turning and storming out. Dominic looked back at Tessa. "You have courage," he said, impressed. "You'll need it." "Who was that?" Tessa asked, her hands shaking slightly. "That," Dominic said grimly, "is the woman who thinks she should be the next Luna, and you just made her very angry." November the 20th, 2025. The Blackwood Estate. 5 days had passed since Tessa Hart had been swept into the hidden world of the Obsidian Ridge Pack. 5 days of living in a mansion that felt more like a cage wrapped in velvet. Her routine was simple but high stakes. She slept in the nursery with Leo and Mia. The twins were inseparable from her. If she went to the bathroom, they sat outside the door guarding it. If she went to the kitchen, they trailed her, holding the hem of her jeans. It was adorable, but it was also a constant reminder of the trauma they had endured. They didn't trust anyone else, not even their father, fully. Dominic was a ghost. He spent his days in the war room with Liam and the enforcers, hunting for the traitor who had bypassed the security wards. He only appeared at dinner, looking more exhausted and lethal each night. On Thursday evening, the tension in the house snapped. Tessa was in the expansive kitchen, trying to convince the pack's chef, a burly man named Gordon, that 3-year-olds should not be eating raw steak for breakfast. "They are wolves, Miss Hart," Gordon grunted, chopping vegetables with a cleaver that looked like a weapon of war. "They need blood for bone density." "They are toddlers," Tessa countered, crossing her arms. "Their digestive tracts are still developing, seared, medium rare at most, and I want spinach in it." Gordon glared at her, but before he could argue, the kitchen door swung open. Dominic walked in. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. He was wearing a tactical vest over a black t-shirt, smelling of ozone and gunpowder. "Gordon, leave us," Dominic commanded. The chef bowed his head and vanished into the pantry. Tessa stood her ground, though her heart did a traitorous flip in her chest. Dominic looked dangerous and tired. So incredibly tired. "Report," Dominic said, leaning against the marble island. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the coffee machine as if it held the secrets of the universe. "The twins are sleeping," Tessa said professionally. "Leo's nightmares are decreasing. Mia is eating better, but they ask for you, Dominic. They miss their dad." Dominic flinched. He finally looked at her. His amber eyes were dim. "They don't look at me the way they look at you. They look at me and see the alpha. They look at you and see safety. They see a parent," Tessa said softly. "You just need to be present. Stop being the alpha for 10 minutes and get on the floor and build Legos with them." Dominic let out a dry, humorless laugh. "I don't have the luxury of playing with Legos, Tessa. My council is breathing down my neck. They want to know who you are. Victor, the High Elder, is demanding I hand you over for interrogation." "Why?" "Because the security footage from the night the pups were taken has been recovered," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "It was wiped, but Liam's tech team recovered a ghost image." He pulled a folded photo from his vest and slid it across the counter. Tessa picked it up. It was grainy, black and white. It showed a figure carrying 2 bundles out of the nursery window. The figure was wearing a hooded cloak. "It doesn't show a face," Tessa said. "No," Dominic agreed, "but look at the wrist." Tessa squinted. On the wrist of the kidnapper there was a watch, a very specific silver watch with a large face. "I've seen that watch," Tessa breathed. "Yesterday, in the hallway." Dominic's body went rigid. "On who?" "The blonde woman," Tessa said. "Serena." Dominic shook his head. "Impossible. Serena is vain, cruel, and ambitious, but she is pack-born. She wouldn't harm a pup. It goes against our deepest instincts. Besides, she was with me in the Border Patrol unit that night. She has an alibi." "Alibis can be faked," Tessa argued. "She hates those kids, Dominic. I see how she looks at them, like they are obstacles." "Be careful, Tessa," Dominic warned, his voice low. "Accusing a high-ranking wolf without hard proof is a death sentence. Serena is the daughter of a councilman. If you are wrong—" "And if I'm right," Tessa challenged, stepping closer to him. She was inches away, close enough to feel the heat radiating off him. "If I'm right, she tried to freeze your children to death to clear the line of succession. Are you going to let politics stop you from seeing the truth?" Dominic stared at her. For a moment, the silence was thick with unsaid things. He reached out, his rough hand grazing her cheek. It was a touch so tender it made Tessa's knees weak. "You have the fire of a Luna," Dominic murmured, almost to himself. "It's dangerous." Suddenly the kitchen lights flickered and died. The emergency sirens began to wail. "Stay here," Dominic roared, his eyes instantly glowing bright amber. "Do not move!" He bolted out of the kitchen. Tessa didn't listen. Her instinct screamed Leo and Mia. She grabbed a heavy cast-iron skillet from the drying rack, the only weapon she had, and ran toward the nursery. The hallway was plunged into darkness, lit only by the red strobe of the emergency alarms. She reached the nursery door. It was ajar. "No!" she gasped. She burst inside. The window was shattered. Cold wind and snow swirled into the room. A dark figure stood over the twins' beds, holding a syringe. "Hey!" Tessa screamed, swinging the skillet with all her might. The figure turned, fast as lightning. It was a man, face covered in a ski mask. He caught the skillet mid-air with one hand, the metal ringing loud. He shoved Tessa backward. She flew across the room, crashing into the bookshelf. Pain exploded in her shoulder. The intruder turned back to the kids. "Leo, bite him!" Tessa yelled. The intruder hesitated. In that split second, a massive shape tore through the doorway. It wasn't Dominic. It was Liam, in his wolf form. The intruder cursed and dove out the second-story window, plummeting into the snow below. Liam didn't follow. He stayed, placing his massive body between the window and the bed, growling into the night. Tessa scrambled up, ignoring her throbbing shoulder, and threw herself over the twins. They were crying, terrified. Dominic arrived 10 seconds later. He took in the scene, the shattered window, the crying pups, Liam guarding, and Tessa clutching his children, her arm bruising rapidly. He walked over to the window, looked at the tracks in the snow, and let out a roar of frustration that shook the foundations of the house. He turned to Tessa. He didn't say a word. He just scooped her and the children up into his arms, holding them as if he would never let go. "You were right," he whispered into her hair. "They are inside the house." November 22nd, 2025, the attack on the nursery changed everything. The estate went into total lockdown. The enforcers patrolled the hallways with assault rifles, but the council, in their infinite wisdom and detachment from reality, refused to cancel the annual Moonlight Ball. It was a tradition that went back 200 years, a night where the packs of the Northwest gathered to reaffirm alliances. And this year the council had an ulterior motive. They wanted Dominic to choose a new mate. "I'm not going," Tessa said, standing in the middle of her bedroom. "You have to," Dominic said. He was standing in the doorway, holding a garment bag. "I cannot leave you and the twins alone in the residential wing. The traitor knows the layout. The safest place for you tonight is in the ballroom, surrounded by 300 witnesses and my personal guard. I'm a nurse, Dominic, not a debutante. I don't do ball gowns." Dominic walked in and unzipped the bag. I took the liberty. It was a dress made of midnight blue silk, the color of the sky just after sunset. It was modest but stunning, with long sleeves and a back that dipped low. "It's beautiful," Tessa admitted. "It's armor," Dominic said. "Wear it. Stay by my side. Tonight, we flush out the rat." The ballroom, 8 p.m. The great hall of Blackwood Estate was transformed. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto a floor of polished marble. Men in tuxedos and women in couture gowns moved like sharks in a tank. The air smelled of expensive perfume and raw, predatory power. When Tessa walked in on Dominic's arm, the room went silent. A human. At the Moonlight Ball. Whispers erupted like wildfire. "Is that the nanny? Why is the alpha scenting her? Look at her neck. No mark." Dominic ignored them all. He kept Tessa tucked into his side, his hand firm on her waist. The heat of his palm burned through the silk of her dress. "Chin up," he whispered. "Show them you belong." "I don't belong," she hissed back, smiling fakely at a glaring elder. "I'm terrified." "Fear keeps you sharp." They reached the dais where the council sat. Victor, the high elder, looked like a vulture in a tuxedo. He was 70 years old, but looked 40, his eyes cold and calculating. "Alpha Cole," Victor said, his voice like gravel. "You bring a pet to the gathering." "I bring a guest, Victor," Dominic said smoothly. "Tessa saved my heirs. She is under my personal protection." "She is a liability," Victor spat, "and she is distracting you from your duties. Have you greeted Lady Serena? She looks radiant tonight." Serena stepped forward from the shadows of the council table. She was wearing a dress of pure silver, tight enough to cut off circulation. She looked magnificent and evil. "Dominic," Serena purred, ignoring Tessa entirely. "Save the first dance for me?" Dominic looked at Serena. Then he looked at Tessa. The orchestra began to play, a slow, haunting waltz. "I'm afraid I'm already spoken for," Dominic said, loud enough for the room to hear. He turned to Tessa and bowed. "May I?" Tessa's heart hammered. To dance with the Alpha was a statement. It was a declaration. "Dominic, people are staring," she whispered. "Let them stare." He swept her onto the floor. As they moved, the world narrowed down to just the two of them. Dominic moved with a grace that belied his size. He led her effortlessly. "You suspect Serena," Dominic murmured in her ear as they spun. "So do I. But the watch you saw, I checked her room. It's gone." "She hid it," Tessa said. "Or someone planted it on her to frame her. Or she gave it to an accomplice." Dominic pulled her closer. "Tonight, we watch who she talks to, who she avoids." The dance was magical, terrifying, and intoxicating. For a few minutes, Tessa forgot about the wolves, the danger, and the contract. She just felt the man holding her. But the spell was broken when the music stopped. Serena marched into the center of the floor, grabbing a microphone from the bandstand. "Excuse me," she announced, her voice shrill. "A toast to our Alpha and to his charity project." Laughter rippled through the sycophants in the room. "It is so noble of Dominic to take in a human stray," Serena continued, her eyes locking on Tessa. "But we all know where this ends. Humans are fragile. They break so easily. They don't understand our ways. For example," Serena snapped her fingers. A waiter appeared, carrying a silver tray with crystal glasses of champagne. "A drink for the guest," Serena said, taking a glass and walking toward Tessa. "To welcome you." Tessa looked at the glass. The liquid was golden, bubbling. "Take it," Serena goaded, "unless you think I'd poison you in front of the whole council." The room held its breath. If Tessa refused, it was an insult. If she drank, she was submitting to Serena's dominance. Tessa reached out, but as her hand hovered over the glass, her nursing instinct kicked in. The smell. Under the expensive grapes and alcohol, there was a faint, metallic scent. Bitter almond. Cyanide. No. Wolfsbane. Wolfsbane was deadly to wolves, but to humans? In high doses, it caused cardiac arrest. Tessa looked at Dominic. He was watching her, his muscles coiled, ready to strike. Tessa took the glass. She smiled at Serena. "Thank you," Tessa said, "but I'm actually allergic to aconitum." Serena's face went pale. Aconitum was the scientific name for wolfsbane. "I don't know what you mean," Serena stammered. "I think you do," Tessa said, her voice ringing clear in the silent hall. "And I think if we gave this drink to the Alpha, he'd be very sick, wouldn't he?" Tessa turned and handed the glass to Dominic. "Test it," she said. Dominic brought the glass to his nose. He sniffed once, then he threw the glass against the marble floor. It shattered. "Wolfsbane!" he roared, the sound echoing like thunder. Chaos erupted. November 22nd, 2025, 10 p.m. The ballroom turned into a war zone. Guards swarmed Serena. She was screaming, claiming she didn't know that the waiter had handed it to her. "Arrest her," Dominic commanded, "and lock down the estate. No one leaves." But as the guards grabbed Serena, a sudden explosion rocked the south wall of the ballroom. Boom! Debris rained down. Smoke filled the air. Screams of panic tore through the crowd. The nursery!" Tessa screamed. "The south wall is under the nursery." Dominic didn't hesitate. He grabbed Tessa's hand and they ran. They sprinted out of the ballroom, through the smoke-filled corridors towards the residential wing. "It's a diversion!" Dominic shouted over the alarms. "Serena was the distraction. The real attack is happening now." They reached the grand staircase. At the top, standing in the hallway leading to the twins' room, was a man. It was Victor, the High Elder. He was holding a semi-automatic rifle. And he wasn't alone. 3 rogue wolves, shifters who had been exiled, were flanking him. "Victor," Dominic growled, shifting halfway. His claws extended, ripping through his tuxedo gloves. "Why?" "Because you are weak, Dominic," Victor yelled. "You let a human contaminate our bloodline. You refuse to mate for power. The pack needs a ruler, not a father." "So you kill my children?" Dominic roared. "I cleanse the line," Victor said calmly, "and then I take the alpha power." He raised the rifle. He wasn't aiming at Dominic. He was aiming at Tessa. "No!" Dominic lunged, but he was too far away. Victor pulled the trigger. Bang! Tessa didn't feel pain at first. She just felt a massive impact, like a sledgehammer hitting her chest. She flew backward, hitting the wall and sliding down. "Tessa!" Dominic's scream was a sound of pure agony. The sight of Tessa falling broke Dominic's control. He didn't just shift. He exploded into his wolf form, mid-air. The massive black wolf hit Victor with the force of a freight train. Jaws snapped. Bones crunched. The fight was brutal and short. The rogue wolves tried to intervene, but Liam and the enforcers arrived, tearing into them. Within seconds, it was over. Victor lay motionless. The rogues were subdued. Dominic shifted back to human form, naked and covered in blood, and scrambled over to Tessa. She was lying on the carpet. The blue silk dress was stained dark red in the center of her chest. "No, no, no," Dominic begged, pressing his hands over the wound. "Get a healer, now!" Tessa blinked. The world was going grey. She looked up at Dominic. He was crying. She had never seen a monster cry before. "The kids!" she wheezed. "They're safe," Dominic sobbed. "Liam has them. They're safe. Stay with me, Tessa. You cannot die. I forbid it. That is an alpha command." Tessa tried to smile. "You can't command a nurse?" Her eyes rolled back. Her heart fluttered like a trapped bird, then stopped. Dominic roared. It wasn't a roar of anger. It was a roar of grief calling to the moon. He bit into his own wrist. "Drink," he ordered, pressing his bleeding wrist to her mouth. "The blood of an alpha heals. Drink, damn you." He forced the blood past her lips. It was a forbidden act. Giving a human alpha blood changed them. It bound them. It was the start of the turning. But Dominic didn't care about the laws. He didn't care about the council. He poured his life force into her, praying to every god he didn't believe in that the woman who had saved his children would not pay for it with her life. Her chest didn't move. The room fell silent, save for the ragged breathing of the alpha who had won the battle but lost the war. November 22nd, 2025, 10:15 p.m., Blackwood Medical Wing. The world was a cacophony of beeping monitors and shouting voices. Tessa Hart was floating above it all, untethered. She looked down and saw a body on a steel gurney, her body. It was pale, lifeless, the blue silk dress cut open to reveal a chest cavity that had been destroyed by a high-caliber round. She saw Dr. Heirs, the pack's trauma surgeon, his hands covered in blood, shouting orders at nurses. She saw Liam, the beta, holding back a man who looked like he was being torn apart from the inside. Dominic. He was roaring, a sound of pure, unadulterated grief. His eyes were no longer amber. They were a void of black. The alpha was losing control. If she died, the bond he had forced upon her in a desperate bid to save her life would snap, and the backlash would likely kill him too. "Clear!" Dr. Heirs shouted, charging the defibrillator paddles. Thump! Her body convulsed. Nothing. Again! Charge to 300. Thump! Nothing. The flatline tone on the monitor was a shrill scream that wouldn't end. "Time of death," Dr. Aris began, his voice shaking. "No!" Dominic broke free from Liam's grip. He shoved the doctor aside and placed his hands directly over her heart. "You do not die, Tessa. You do not leave me. I gave you my blood. Fight!" Tessa, floating in the void, felt a tug. It wasn't a gentle pull. It was a hook in her navel, yanking her back with violent force. She felt heat, fire. It started in her mouth, where the metallic taste of alpha blood lingered and spread through her veins like molten lava. It hurt. God, it hurt more than the bullet. It felt like every cell in her body was being incinerated and rebuilt. On the table, Tessa's back arched. A gasp, ragged and wet, tore from her throat. The monitor beeped once, then again. Then it settled into a fast, erratic rhythm. "She's back," Dr. Aris whispered, stunned. "Get her to the OR. The blood is clotting the wound, but we need to repair the lung tissue manually. Move!" Dominic collapsed against the wall, sliding down until he hit the floor, burying his face in his hands. He had saved her. But he knew the price. He had just sentenced a human woman to a life she never asked for. November the 25th, 2025. The Awakening. The first thing Tessa noticed was the smell. It was overwhelming. She could smell the antiseptic floor cleaner, but under that, she could smell the pine trees outside the window, a mile away. She could smell the stale coffee in a cup 3 rooms over. She could smell rain and clove and musk. She opened her eyes. The room was dim, but to her it looked as bright as noon. She could see the dust motes dancing in the air. She could see the microscopic threads in the blanket covering her. She tried to sit up. Her body felt heavy, dense, but also vibrating with an energy she couldn't explain. "Easy," a rough voice said. Dominic was sitting by the bed. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. Stubble covered his jaw, and his clothes were wrinkled. "You're alive," he said, his voice cracking. Tessa looked at him. She didn't just see him. She felt him. A hum in the back of her mind, like a radio frequency she was suddenly tuned into. She could feel his exhaustion, his relief, and his guilt. "What did you do to me?" she rasped. Her voice sounded deeper, huskier. Dominic closed his eyes. "You were dead, Tessa. Victor's shot destroyed your right ventricle. Medical science couldn't save you, so I did the one thing that is forbidden." "The blood," she whispered, remembering the copper taste. "Alpha blood is a mutagen," Dominic explained, staring at the floor. "It rebuilds the host. It strengthens them. But the human body cannot handle that kind of power without adapting. To survive the blood, you had to change." Tessa looked at her hands. Her fingernails looked sharper. Her skin felt tougher. "I'm a wolf?" she asked. "You are a hybrid," Dominic said. "Turned wolves are rare. They are often unstable. But you're stable. I can feel it. Your heart is strong." "And the kids?" Tessa asked, panic spiking. "Here," a small voice chirped. Leo and Mia popped up from the other side of the bed. They had been sleeping on the floor, refusing to leave. "Tessa smells like Daddy now," Mia said, climbing onto the bed and sniffing Tessa's arm. "She smells like Pack." Leo nodded solemnly. "Our Tessa." Tessa wrapped her arms around them. She realized with a shock that she could hear their heartbeats. Thump, 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 thump. It was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. "I'm not a monster?" she asked Leo, tears pricking her eyes. Leo looked offended. "No, you're the Mama Wolf." Dominic flinched at the title. He stood up. "Tessa, there is a complication. The council is here, the remaining elders. They know what I did. Turning a human without a vote is a capital offense. They are demanding an audience." "They want to kill you?" Tessa asked, the fear replaced by a sudden, cold anger. "They want to kill us," Dominic corrected. "They consider a turned wolf an abomination. They want to strip me of my alpha status and execute you." Tessa looked at the twins. She looked at Dominic. the man who had ripped his own wrist open to save her. Something inside her snapped. It wasn't the nurse who was afraid of conflict. It was the wolf, the creature that had been born in the fire of the bullet wound. She swung her legs out of bed. She stood up. She wobbled for a second, then found her balance. She felt stronger than she ever had in her life. "Get me a dress," Tessa said calmly. Dominic blinked. "Tessa, you need to rest. I will handle them." "No," Tessa said. She turned to him, and her eyes flashed, not amber, but a brilliant, piercing, electric blue. "They want to judge the new Luna. Then let them look me in the eye when they do it. November 25th, 2025, the Great Hall." The atmosphere in the Great Hall was suffocating. 5 elders sat at the long table, their faces grim. Hundreds of pack members filled the room, whispering. They had heard the rumors. The Alpha had fallen for a human. The Alpha had broken the law. Dominic stood in the center of the room, looking defiant. "This is madness, Dominic!" Elder Holloway, a stern man with grey hair, spat. "You have brought a human into our bloodline. You have compromised the security of Obsidian Ridge. We have no choice but to invoke the right of severance." "She saved my heirs," Dominic roared. "She took a bullet for the pack. That makes her more wolf than any of you cowards who hid during the attack." "She is a genetic mistake," Holloway yelled. "She is weak. She will go feral. She must be put down before she kills someone." "Try it," a voice rang out. The heavy double doors at the back of the hall swung open. Tessa walked in. She wasn't wearing a hospital gown. She was wearing a black dress she had found in Dominic's closet, belted at the waist. She was barefoot, wanting to feel the stone floor beneath her. She walked down the center aisle. Every head turned. She didn't look weak. She didn't look sick. She looked predatory. She stopped next to Dominic. She didn't cower behind him. She stood shoulder to shoulder with him. "You are discussing my execution," Tessa said, her voice amplified by the acoustics of the hall. "I thought it would be polite to invite me." Elder Holloway sneered. "The abomination speaks. Do you even know what you are, girl? You are a parasite feeding on alpha blood." "I'm the woman who saved your future alpha," Tessa said, pointing to the balcony where Liam stood with the twins. "I am the woman who smelled the poison in your wine when your own senses failed you. And I am the woman who survived a bullet to the heart to come back and stand here." "Words," Holloway dismissed. "You are not pack. You have no rank." "Rank isn't given," Tessa said, remembering something Dominic had told her in the car. "Rank is taken." She stepped forward, isolating herself from Dominic. "I challenge your assessment," Tessa said. The room gasped. A challenge from a turned wolf to an elder? It was suicide. Holloway stood up, laughing. "You challenge me, a human nurse. I will break you in 2. Holloway shifted. It was fast, too fast for a human eye to follow. A massive grey wolf lunged at Tessa, jaws snapping for her throat. Dominic moved to intercept, but Tessa shouted, "No!" It was an alpha command. Dominic froze, his body obeying the authority in her voice against his will. Tessa didn't shift. She didn't know how yet. But she didn't need to. As Holloway lunged, Tessa used her new, heightened perception. She saw the trajectory of his jump. She saw the opening. She dropped to her knees, sliding across the polished floor under his leaping form. As he passed over her, she drove her fist upward, channeling every ounce of her new strength into a strike at his solar plexus, the wolf's vulnerable spot. Crack! The blow knocked the wind out of the massive beast. Holloway crashed into the floor, skidding into the table. Before he could recover, Tessa was on him. She grabbed the fur at the scruff of his neck and slammed his head into the stone floor. "Stay down!" she roared. The sound that came out of her mouth wasn't human. It was a dual-tone growl, the voice of a woman and the voice of a wolf layered together. Holloway whined. He tried to rise, but Tessa pressed her forearm against his throat. "I am Tessa Hart," she snarled, her blue eyes glowing like neon. "I am the mother of the heirs. I am the mate of the Alpha. And if you ever threaten my family again, I will not be as gentle as a nurse." Holloway went limp. He bared his neck, the universal sign of submission. The hall was dead silent. Tessa stood up, straightening her dress. She looked around the room. "Does anyone else have an objection?" she asked. Slowly, one by one, the wolves in the room bowed their heads. They recognized strength. They recognized the protection instinct. They recognized a Luna. Dominic walked over to her. He looked at her with awe, love, and a burning pride. "You," he whispered, "are terrifying." "I learned from the best," she replied, her adrenaline fading, her knees shaking slightly. Dominic caught her. He turned to the crowd. "Behold," Dominic bellowed, "Tessa Hart, the savior of the heirs, the turned wolf, the Luna of Obsidian Ridge." A cheer erupted. It started low and built into a deafening roar. Even the remaining elders stood and bowed. Leo and Mia came running down the aisle, Liam trailing behind them with a grin. The twins tackled Tessa's legs. "Mama Wolf won!" Leo cheered. Tessa looked down at them, then up at Dominic. The contract was over. The fake nanny charade was over. This was real. "So," Tessa said, leaning into Dominic's chest, "does this mean I get a raise?" Dominic laughed, a rich, deep sound that filled the hall. He kissed her forehead, sealing the bond for everyone to see. "You get everything, Tessa. You get the world." 6 months later. The snow was melting in Montana. Tessa sat on the porch of the Blackwood estate, watching the sunset. She held a mug of tea in her hands, though she preferred rare steaks these days. In the yard, 3 wolves were playing. One was massive and black. Dominic. 2 were small and clumsy. Leo and Mia, who had finally learned to shift at will. Tessa smiled. She hadn't gone back to Seattle. She hadn't gone back to nursing humans. She had a new patient list, a pack of 300 werewolves who were prone to getting into fights. She was the busiest healer in the state. Dominic trotted up to the porch. He shifted, pulling on a pair of sweatpants he had left on the railing. He sat next to her, pulling her into his lap. "They're getting fast," Dominic noted, watching the kids. "They take after you," Tessa said. "They take after you," Dominic corrected. "They're stubborn." He kissed her neck, right over the spot where he had marked her the night of her coronation. "Regrets?" he asked softly. He asked it every week. He still carried the guilt of taking her humanity. Tessa looked at the moon rising over the ridge. She thought about her lonely apartment in Seattle. She thought about the cold dinners, for one. Then she looked at the family playing in the grass, the man holding her who loved her with a ferocity that defied logic, and the power humming in her own veins. "No," Tessa said, turning to kiss him. "I didn't lose my life, Dominic. I found it." Dominic smiled, his amber eyes glowing with promise. "Good, because the pups want a little brother." Tessa laughed, throwing a cushion at him as the twins howled at the moon, welcoming the night. And that is how a nurse stopped for a stray dog and ended up ruling a kingdom. It's a reminder that sometimes the things that scare us the most, like taking a risk on a stranger or standing up to a bully, are the things that lead us to where we truly belong. Tessa didn't just save the pups. She saved the alpha from his own darkness. If you enjoyed this story of twists, betrayal, and romance, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. What would you do if you found wolf pups in the snow? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.